Hi, everyone. Um, Today, I want to talk about innovation in a slightly different way and different place, which is innovation in the way we do our work every day, innovation in productivity. For us, um, so first let me define us. I started a new company called Time is Limited. I'm also a tech founder of a company that's two floors above us, Social Bakers, which has almost 500 people, and we've been around for 10 and a half years. But I started a new company also, Time is Limited, and that's what I'm doing these days. And I want to talk about Kaizen 2.0. And so, important thing is, what is Kaizen? So, Kaizen is a productivity method used originally by Japanese companies after the Second World War, and it was intended that if they found an issue in a production line, they would stop the entire production line of a factory. They would put their heads together, optimize it, so not only that the issue doesn't, is fixed, but that it doesn't happen again. And then they restart it. So it's about sustainable change, change that you will not make the mistake again. And it's been around, and many, American factories were coming to Japan, figuring out, my gosh, how are these guys doing it? And they just couldn't figure it out. And we think the biggest problem is that we do not have our own Kaizen for the digital age, for the new companies, for the high-skilled workers. And while this might have worked for factories, today, we look at even tech companies, innovative tech companies. We look at corporations. So much is happening there, but we do not see Kaizen. We do not see people saying, okay, let's stop and iterate. Let's create a cycle where we fix the issues that we're generating. But no, and we're running into quite a lot of issues. And on average, people have a ton of meetings. Are they all productive? Absolutely not. We're seeing overload with emails. I go to managers' offices every day and I look at the mailbox icon. They have like 30,000 unread emails. Is that productive? Absolutely not. But do they stop and think about whether it's productive? No. And of course, with all these new tools like Slack or Facebook Workplace or Google Chat in the enterprise, we don't know. If we deploy instant messaging on the company, do they become faster or slower? But no one goes and stops and iterates. And the worst thing is, based on all of these things, no one has time to think anymore. And that's a big problem. So, of course, in the workplace, the trend is we have more and more knowledge workers or high-skilled workers in the workforce. This will be obviously a majority of the workforce very soon because most of the sort of routine tasks and routine jobs, they're deeply affected by what Google talked about today. Automation, AI, all of this will affect the people on the bottom here. And the other thing is people work less and less time. While people work in the 1900s, people worked sort of 60 to 70 hours a week. Now, we're seeing laws incorporating that we're looking at 30, 32-hour work weeks potentially. And so we have less and less time. We're getting more and more money for it for whatever reason. And, we're seeing actually a positive impact on GDP per capita all across these countries over the last 100 years. So less time, more money, better GDP per capita. Very logical, right? So we had to become more productive during this process, and we have become more productive. But I'm arguing we could be even more. And we have in the workforce so many new opportunities. There are all of these new tools, new tech tools, new communication tools that people can use. Video conferencing, instant messaging, Slack has been a massive trend at companies. And any company that doesn't use sort of video conferencing properly, I wouldn't estimate they can maintain their level of productivity if you do it on a dull phone call. And meetings have become, terrifying source of non-productivity at a company. I mean, we see companies and we see departments of companies invite, on average, 20 people for one meeting. On an average, which means if they do one-on-ones, that means they also invite 40 people. So the average is 20. Now, of course, like 12 accept it, which still is a horrible, horrible, horrible number. We see companies do 6-hour meetings with 40 members of their top management on a weekly basis. That meeting alone costs 1 million Czech crowns. The prep meetings for that meeting cost multitudes of that. So, and the problem is, if you're sitting in a meeting, you're usually not, doing your work. You're just sitting there in a, sort of a debate. Now, I don't argue there are new sort of meetings, 2.0 meetings, where you sit down, open it, iterate a presentation, or work something. So, of course, there are good meetings and bad meetings. But we have become such a meeting culture for various reasons, and we're seeing managers have 110 to 120 meetings per month. Now, that essentially means that's all of your work day, all of your work week, your work month gone. And that also means that manager, you usually hire top management. If you're CEO of a company, you hire them to think, not to sit in meetings all day. You've hired senior people who have area of expertise. You hire a CMO to run marketing, not to sit in a meeting and tell people, yeah, okay, sounds like a good idea, and have a few minutes of input. Or if they run it the other way, that they run it that meeting's theirs, the people get no input at all. Which means we're stuck in a death trap, and we don't stop and iterate. So Kaizen 2.0 should be about stopping those meetings and iterating. Elon Musk says anyone can ever walk out of any of my meetings. And he also says if a rule thinks it's as dumb that it could go in a Dilbert comics, don't respect the rules. We also see in companies, the bigger the company, the smaller the decline rate of meetings is. So they basically don't decline meetings. They would accept, accept, and join every single meeting they get an invite to. We're seeing decline rates all the way hovering around 0%, 0.5%, maybe 1%. It's literally when you would just not have time. We're also seeing departments and companies that have 10 to 25% decline rate, that basically bold enough to say, no, I will not attend that meeting, I will not go waste my time. And we think, again, we need more of that. We need people to stop and think, to accept and, support the culture of meetings. But yet, we still keep failing at productivity big time in most of these areas. And it's a massive problem. And many companies approach it with very different solutions. Some companies like Amazon and Apple limit the amount of people in meetings. Now, some companies say, okay, meetings are limited in time. Others say, okay, managers have to have this allocated. Or, Asana, a really big company as well, say there are no meetings on Wednesdays. Now, we have, at time is limited, we measure calendaring and time at companies. And we have a client that had a no meeting Wednesday. So when we looked at the data, we thought Wednesday would have maybe 5% of the meetings other days would. But when in fact it only had 5% less than the other days, which means the rule was not being respected at all. So if this company should have seen that data, it needed to stop and say, well, that rule is nonsense, let's try something else. But they haven't done that. And we think more of these companies have to approach an optimization framework like that. And yet we have gone from a pretty shitty analog way of keeping time and meetings, offices, and productivity to a whole new digital way of doing things, right? Now we have great connectivity. Oh my gosh, these internet speeds are fast. Screens, video conferencing, the hardware and the software and the connectivity and the phones are all there. So what's the limiting factor? It's us, it's people, and it's managers to a biggest degree. Because these can influence change, and they can influence real change, to go in and say, okay, time to change, time to stop and iterate. We're doing nonsense by having 12 hours of meetings every day. And most managers that I then come up to, middle managers, I look at their calendars and I say, guys, when do you do your work? I look at their calendars from 8 a.m. There are meetings till, 6 p.m. And they say, at night. I'm like, okay, well, when do you spend time with your family or anything else? We don't, on the weekends sometimes. That's not a way of doing things. We haven't decreased the time spent just for the, people to start doing their work at night, which they obviously, you won't say they actually did. So the point is all of this new technology that we've gone through, and the thing is, when all the technology is there, all of the software is there, we become the limiting factor. So right now, yeah, there's obviously time, time for AI, time for all of this, but it's time to stop and iterate. Look at the data and look at it first. And now, all of these tools, whether it's video conferencing tools, collaboration tools, emails, calendars, they all produce an insane amount of data. 10 years ago, all of these companies would have been non-cloud. To get the data out would take, months, if not, years. Today, to get data from an entire company with 100,000 people, it takes one click and 1 minute of downloading. And it's a lot of data, but again, connectivity data, all of this is there. So the point is, why aren't we using that to better our time? And you have to manage this. You have to manage this time and energy. So we're looking at countless different methods. One of the methods is sort of time blocking, just clustering the time closer to each other. Rather than having 1 hour meeting, 40 minutes, 1 hour meeting, 40 minutes, clustering them closer together, saving time so that you then have a block of 2-hour time. Amazon, for example, you put a time in your calendar and it's sacred. It's meeting with myself. Whatever you do, thinking, emails, hairdresser, I don't know, but you need time to think, to optimize, to iterate. I best think when I sit down at a conference, I have a conference block, no one bothers me, I can think and brainstorm. That's great, that works for me. It works different for everyone. But most importantly, we work in very big teams and companies. So I can't obviously not present my new company. So at time is limited at our new company, we do exactly that. We take that data and help companies analyze it. We're very early on. We're looking for test clients that are willing to work with us, iterate, and stop and iterate, look at the data. Because we think this sort of new way of working, this new approach, you really have to stop first. You have to stop, you have to look at the data that's there, rethink and iterate that process and start over again. Sometimes that might take 5-10 minutes with a small team. Sometimes to rethink that in a bigger company, it might mean stopping the entire company, running a big company event. We've seen this, I've seen this at Social Bakers when we had a great client in Mexico. This company had 100,000 people. And they stopped. Every year, they stopped for 2 weeks. And they met for 2 weeks. They took every important person over to HQ, and they stopped everything. They iterated in workshops. How do we do things differently? And I was constantly going to their conferences for the last 3 years. I have not seen a company not only catch up, but excel and overtake their competitors that fast as they did, because they stopped and iterated the process. So Kaizen 2.0, thank you for your time.